Yukari is a typical career woman. She devotes almost all her energy to her work. This is made possible because her boyfriend Kippei manages her daily life in an orderly manner. The two have been dating for 5 years, living a harmonious and happy life. However, at that time, Yukari was unaware that the happiness she enjoyed was about to be completely shattered. One day at work, Yukari received a call from her mother, who expressed a desire to have dinner with her and Kippei the next day. Upon hearing this, Kippei's expression suddenly changed, seemingly reluctant to meet Yukari's mother. But Yukari did not notice this detail and insisted that Kippei must be present the next day. After work the next day, Yukari chatted with a friend about recent events. Her friend mentioned that she had just broken up with her boyfriend because her uncle, a detective, discovered that he had a marriage history. Yukari found this intriguing and did not think deeply about it, instead talking about bringing Kippei to meet her mother that evening. Her friend was happy for Yukari, believing that Kippei, as an intern doctor, was an ideal marriage candidate. However, by nightfall, Kippei still had not shown up. Since Kippei rarely used his phone, Yukari was unable to contact him at all. Yukari's mother was quite displeased and called the waiter to order food. After dinner, Yukari returned home in anger, only to find that Kippei was not in the house. Even late into the night, Kippei was still unreachable, and Yukari's anger gradually turned into worry. Just as she was feeling anxious, the doorbell suddenly rang. At the door were 2 police officers, and Yukari followed them to the hospital, where she was shocked to find Kippei lying on a hospital bed. The incident had occurred a few hours earlier. Kippei had collapsed on the street and was taken to the hospital by passers-by. Upon diagnosis, Kippei was found to have a subarachnoid hemorrhage, a common yet dangerous condition. Even if he recovers smoothly, the patient may suffer from cognitive impairments or even fall into a long-term coma. Before Yukari could recover from her sadness, the police suddenly asked if the person on the bed was indeed Kippei. Yukari felt confused but still confirmed her boyfriend's identity once again. The police then presented Kippei's identification, stating that all information except for the address could not be verified. According to official records, there was no such person. Yukari felt a shock in her heart, filled with confusion and uncertainty. She stared at her unconscious boyfriend, feeling increasingly lost. After returning home, Yukari searched through Kippei's belongings and found that his wallet was completely empty, and his notebook had no writing in it. In the midst of panic, she noticed Kippei's work ID. Yukari rushed to the hospital to inquire, but the front desk staff could not find any employee information under the name Kippei after checking all employee records. In desperation, Yukari had no choice but to seek help from the police. However, the police stated that cases of identity fraud are common, and Kippei might have changed his name to escape debts or criminal issues. The police also reassured Yukari that discovering this matter before marriage is certainly better than learning the truth after getting married. This relationship that had lasted for 5 years was ultimately hard to let go of easily. Yukari walked aimlessly on the street, her thoughts involuntarily drifting back to the past. She met Kippei on the day of the 311 earthquake. At that time, Yukari had just escaped from the subway, feeling unwell and painfully squatting among the surging crowd. Kippei, passing by, noticed this scene and proactively approached her, asking about her condition with concern. Then, Kippei kindly took off his coat and draped it over Yukari. After leaving the subway station, Kippei learned that Yukari needed to walk to her company and saw that she was wearing inconvenient high heels, so he swapped shoes with her. This gesture warmed Yukari's heart. She asked Kippei for his name, and after a long hesitation, he finally only told her his surname, Koid. At this point in her recollection, Yukari suddenly caught sight of the Koid building standing across from the subway entrance. In an instant, she realized that she had been living in a lie, and her sadness instantly turned into a surge of anger. She decided to discard all of Kippei's belongings. However, when she saw Kippei's beloved toy, in a fit of rage, she stomped on it hard, but due to the reaction force, she accidentally fell to the ground. Images of their past happiness flooded her mind, but now they only intensified her inner pain. Despite this, Yukari still did not give up on finding out Kippei's true identity. She sought out the detective uncle Sho that her friend had mentioned and entrusted him to investigate. After understanding the situation, Sho initially dismissed it, thinking it was just a marriage fraud case. Then, the hacker assistant discovered Yukari's personal information, revealing that she was an executive at a beverage company. Sho felt a sudden regret, thinking that the agreed compensation was too low. Unaware of this, Yukari arrived at the hospital but was too distracted to care for the sick Kippei, returning home alone in the night. Unexpectedly, Just as she reached downstairs, she caught sight of a woman trying to open her mailbox. The woman noticed Yukari and immediately lowered her head, quickly fleeing the scene. Sho soon learned of this and ordered the hacker to retrieve the surveillance footage from that time. His intuition told him that this woman must know the underlying truth. The next day, the woman tried to access Yukari's mailbox again, unaware that Sho had been waiting nearby. Sho approached and questioned the woman about her intentions. The woman remained silent, attempting to find an opportunity to escape. Naturally, Sho would not let her get away, cornering the woman and closing in step by step. Unexpectedly, the woman delivered a spinning kick, striking Sho in a vital area, and seized the chance to flee quickly. Thinking she had successfully escaped, the woman returned along the road to the cafe where she worked, unaware that Sho had been following her and had informed Yukari of her whereabouts. Sho and Yukari found the woman at the cafe, warning her that spying on the mailbox constituted a legal intrusion, and if she continued to refuse to explain the truth, they would turn the matter over to the police. Yukari had also lost her patience and took out a photo of Kip-pei to question the woman. To their surprise, upon seeing the photo, a sweet smile appeared on the woman's face. After learning that Kip-pei was currently hospitalized, the woman finally stopped being silent. She softly said that Kip-pei often used a computer to create works in this cafe. Because Kip-pei was handsome, she had long harbored feelings for him. This left Yukari puzzled. Kip-pei had never used a mobile phone, and how could he use a computer? Seeing that Yukari was unwilling to believe her, the woman took Sho and Yukari to the storage cabinet behind the cafe, where indeed, a laptop was hidden. Soon, the hacker successfully cracked the computer password, which was 201000920. This string of numbers resembled a date, but Yukari had no clue, as she had not yet met Kip-pei at that time. As the computer started up, the group discovered a document on the desktop. The document was an astonishing 700 pages long. Evidently, this was the manuscript Kip-pei had written in the cafe. Sho immediately instructed his assistant to print the entire document. Upon examination, it was found to be a novel set in the Seto Inland Sea, narrated in the first person, depicting the daily life of a family of 3. However, judging by the content of the novel's final chapter, the work was not yet complete. The woman nearby also mentioned that Kip-pei seemed to have been troubled lately and had not written anything for several days. Then, the woman expressed her desire to visit Kip-pei in the hospital. This action triggered strong dissatisfaction from Yukari. She emphasized that Kip-pei was her boyfriend and had nothing to do with this woman. Unexpectedly, the woman, with a tone of boasting, recounted Kip-ei's daily moments at the cafe. In an instant, even Sho sensed the tense atmosphere between the two. Yukari, unwilling to argue further, picked up the printed manuscript on the table and left angrily. Sho saw this and let out a long sigh, finally able to focus on studying Kip-ei's work. The novel mentions that the male protagonist and his wife have a son, and the wife has a black mole behind her ear, living a happy life by the Seto Inland Sea. The next day, Yukari was awakened by the ringtone of her phone and suddenly remembered that it was the day of the company's new product launch. She hurried to the company, only to see her friend showcasing the work that should have belonged to her. Her superior, looking angry, found Yukari and criticized her recent poor performance, suggesting that she take a few days off to rest at home. Yukari tried to explain, but seeing her friend's triumphant expression, she realized that she had been completely excluded from the project. This instead allowed Yukari to focus more on investigating the mystery of Kip-ei's background. She returned to the detective agency and found a map of the Seto Inland Sea hanging on the wall. The hacker then explained that Kip-ei's novel mentioned the protagonist often visiting a lighthouse that resembles a candle at sunset, which might be a key clue. The hacker further stated that the content of the novel was very realistic, like a personal family diary. Yukari's heart trembled. Could it be that everything written in the book was Kip-ei's personal experience? Meanwhile, Sho was sitting on a hillside, secretly observing a woman on the balcony behind him. Suddenly, a girl walked close. Sho's eyes widened instantly, wanting to see the person's face, but soon he was noticed by the woman. Sho was startled and quickly lowered his head. On the other side, a troubled Yukari returned to the hospital and was shocked to see the cafe woman leaning close to Kip-pei. Yukari was immediately filled with rage, pulling the woman away and discovering that she was trying to shave Kip-ei's beard. This made Yukari unable to tolerate it any longer and warned the woman not to meddle. But the woman, with a smug smile, retorted, asking if Yukari had already become distant from Kip-pei. The woman stated that she met Kip-pei on a dating app. She also claimed that Kip-pei had become this way due to feeling too empty inside. Upon hearing this, Yukari completely lost control of her emotions and slapped the woman. Then, Yukari rushed to the detective agency as fast as she could, took the relevant materials, and decided to head to the Seto Inland Sea to investigate. She had to uncover Kippy Eye's true identity. Yukari opened the novel and found that it mentioned a small hole under the lighthouse, where the male protagonist regarded a bottle cap and glass beads as treasures, hiding them in this cave. Thus, Yukari followed the descriptions in the novel and inspected every lighthouse by the sea one by one. At that moment, as the sun was setting, a weary Yukari squatted on the ground, but her heart already had a clear direction. However, Sho did not agree, believing that it was unrealistic to seek the truth solely based on the content of the novel. Unexpectedly, just as he finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. Standing outside was the woman he had secretly observed in the morning, who was also his ex-wife from whom he had long divorced. Seeing this scene, the hacker wisely took his leave. The woman placed a paternity test report in front of Sho, which confirmed that her daughter was indeed Sho's biological daughter. The clear handwriting on the report stirred a mix of emotions in Sho. The woman did not say much more, only hoping that Sho could handle the matter properly. As night fell, Yukari entered a local tavern and saw the owner talking with two men. Yukari did not think much of it and ordered a few bottles of beer. Moments later, feeling the effects of the alcohol, Yukari began to share her experiences with the two men. However, the two men only wanted to take the opportunity to flirt with Yukari, but fortunately, the owner intervened in time, and the two men had to leave with their drunken companion, disgruntled. Yukari also knew she had lost her composure and angrily said that it was Kippei who had betrayed her first. But before she could finish her sentence, her stomach churned violently. The owner quickly handed her a container. In her hazy consciousness, Yukari recalled a time when she returned home after a social event, leaning by the toilet and vomiting continuously. Her disheveled appearance made Kippei feel both heartbroken and angry, advising her not to drink so much in the future. But this only fueled Yukari's dissatisfaction. She emphasized that the nature of her work was such and accused Kippei of not working, thus unable to understand her difficulties. These words deeply hurt Kippei, and he silently walked out of the house. Yukari also realized she had spoken inappropriately and hurriedly chased after him. In the end, she found Kippei sitting alone on a swing. To ease the awkward atmosphere, Yukari mentioned that her sister had recently given birth to a daughter, while she herself wanted a boy. This was meant to be a warm statement, but Kippy Eye's face showed sadness, as if it touched upon painful memories deep within him, leaving Yukari momentarily at a loss. She had no choice but to quickly change the subject. The next morning, Yukari woke up from her hangover. Recalling her behavior from the previous night, she quickly apologized to the owner. Unexpectedly, the man returned, stating that he had seen Kippei working on this island. Yukari was overjoyed and immediately called Sho. Upon hearing this, Sho also perked up and instructed his assistant to investigate temporary workers in the Seto Inland Sea, while he grabbed his car keys and rushed to the scene. After the ferry docked, Sho successfully met up with Yukari. Yukari originally wanted to continue investigating the lighthouse, but Sho thought this was a complete waste of time. After all, there are many lighthouses, and if they were to investigate each one, it would take at least several months. Yukari had no choice but to follow Sho around asking questions. However, after visiting several places, no one had seen Kippei. Sho felt exhausted both physically and mentally, yet he found Yukari still full of determination. This made Sho feel respect and understand that Yukari had poured all her effort into this. So after setting off again, Sho took the initiative to suggest going to investigate the lighthouse. Yukari was overjoyed and immediately changed plans to go to various lighthouses with Sho. But until sunset, the two still found nothing. The feeling of disappointment was like the night, slowly eating away at the light of hope. Even Yukari began to feel self-doubt. She asked Sho for a cigarette, lamenting the time spent without any leads. But Sho was rather optimistic, believing that at least they were searching in the right direction and would eventually find new clues. Sho then praised Yukari's perseverance, thinking she already had the demeanor of a detective. The next day, the two arrived at a lighthouse standing on a reef. The sea originally held no hope, but unexpectedly, Yukari indeed discovered a small hole. Yukari also took out a jar from the cave. Sho was very excited and opened the jar with force, causing a large number of glass beads to roll out. Yukari then poured out a lot of bottle caps and a toy from it, and these items were exactly the same as Kippy Eye's cherished belongings. Seeing this, Sho was overjoyed, convinced that Kippei had indeed lived here. But Yukari's state of mind became increasingly complicated. She had put in a lot of effort to uncover the truth, but just as the truth was about to be revealed, she felt fear. if Kippy Eye's past was truly unbearable to look back on, what would she do in the future? The next morning, the two inquired around the lighthouse. Soon, a man recognized that the person in the photo was Shun, who worked at the fishing association. As the man spoke, he took out a photo of himself with Shun from before. Sho quickly urged Yukari to come and check the photo, but Yukari just stood there with her head down, and after a long time, she finally mustered the courage to step forward. Yukari took the phone and found that the man in the photo did indeed resemble Kippei to some extent. Unaware of Yukari's concerns, Sho drove her to the fishing association. But Yukari hesitated to get out of the car, lacking the courage to face the truth that was about to be revealed, which made Sho furious. He sternly questioned Yukari how this investigation could be started or stopped at personal will. What is the meaning of the vast amount of time and effort they have spent on this? Upon hearing this, Yukari was equally filled with rage and inadvertently mentioned Sho, who abandoned his wife and daughter. This statement instantly touched Sho's bottom line. Sho threw Yukari's luggage on the ground and quickly drove away while Yukari bent down to pick it up. Thus, Yukari could only walk along the small path to leave. Due to wearing high heels, her heels were soon worn out. The wound seeping with blood made Yukari recall that it was Kippei who had exchanged shoes with her, allowing her to reach the company smoothly. After work that day, she encountered Kippei again at the subway station. She took the initiative to stop Kippei and invited him to her home as a guest. Coincidentally, Kippei had caught a cold, so she took care of him and expressed her feelings for Kippei. She candidly stated that she wanted to be with Kippei forever, as no one had cared for her like this before. Since then, the two officially established a romantic relationship. Yukari went out to work and earn money for the family. Kippei stayed at home, diligently managing the household chores. They talked about everything, and the smiles on their faces seemed like they would never fade away. Immersed in these sweet memories, Yukari suddenly felt enlightened. Since Kippy Eye's feelings for her were by no means false, what did his past matter? After realizing this, Yukari took the initiative to look for Sho. Sho's anger had already dissipated significantly, so he opened the car door for Yukari, and the two joined hands again to explore Kippy Eye's past. Following the directions of passersby, they arrived at the shipyard where Shun worked. After the staff learned of their intentions, a worker suddenly stood up and called out to Shun. Sho and Yukari were momentarily stunned, unsure of what was happening. But when Shun turned around, they found that his appearance bore a slight resemblance to Kippei. This unexpected result made Yukari unable to help but smile wryly. She felt regretful for the failed search, but secretly relieved that the truth had not been completely uncovered. Once her emotions settled, Yukari couldn't help but fall into confusion. She didn't even understand why she was so obsessed with uncovering Kippy Eye's past. Upon hearing this, Sho was about to comfort Yukari. Unexpectedly, Shun suddenly ran over and informed them that in 2010, a police officer from Hiroshima had come looking for him, seemingly for the same purpose of finding Kippei. This news sparked a light in Yukari's mind. She speculated that Kippei must have been involved in a significant incident back then. She immediately contacted her assistant to investigate the events that occurred in Hiroshima on that date corresponding to the computer password. Sho took Yukari and headed to inquire about the relevant situation locally. However, during the drive, the car suddenly had a flat tire and crashed into a roadside drainage ditch. In this remote area, there were no passersby at all. Yukari initially wanted to try to drive the car out, but accidentally sprayed the windshield washer fluid. This left her feeling disheartened, resting her head on the steering wheel. Seeing this, Sho casually began to talk about his past experiences. Many years ago, Sho discovered his wife's infidelity and thus suspected that his daughter was not his biological child. During an intense argument, and emotionally out of control, Sho mentioned this matter in front of his daughter. Since then, his daughter had never spoken to him again. As a result, Sho had thought more than once that if he had not discovered the truth back then, he might have been able to live more peacefully. These words plunged Yukari into painful turmoil. Should she really choose ignorance and return to Kippei? But soon after, Yukari dismissed this thought. As she pushed the car, she firmly said that perhaps Kippei was suffering internally because he was hiding a secret, so she must uncover all the truths. Seeing this, Sho no longer tried to persuade her and stepped forward to help Yukari push the car. At that moment, a hacker suddenly sent a message. Sho glanced at it and was suddenly stunned. The message contained Kippy Eye's past. Kippy Eye's original name was Kohei Yasuda, and he once had a happy family, but his wife and child tragically passed away on the same day, which was September 20th, 2010. After hearing this, Yukari felt as if struck by lightning, completely unprepared for the heavy secret of her boyfriend. Moments later, a car came around the corner, and the two were finally able to escape. Soon after, Yukari and Sho arrived at the small town where Kippei once lived, and from the neighbor's old man, they learned about everything that had happened back then. Kippei was originally a skilled surgeon, and due to work, he often traveled for business and attended meetings. His wife felt increasingly lonely due to long periods of solitude, and her emotions became more unstable. Kippei's wife often went to the neighbor's house to inquire about her husband's whereabouts. After Kippei went out again, the tragedy unfolded completely. That night, when Kippei returned home, he saw his wife softly humming while holding a doll, but the child had already stopped breathing in the bathtub. Before Kippei could recover from this shock, his wife suddenly ran out of the house and stood in front of an oncoming truck, a relieved smile on her face. This incident brought Kippei an immeasurable heavy blow. He left his hometown, wandering like a lonely soul, until he met Yukari. At this moment, Sho learned from the novel that the key to the house was hidden under the flower pot. Following the clues in the novel, he found the key and handed it to Yukari. Yukari opened the door, and a musty smell rushed out, yet the room remained tidy and clean, as if time had long since stood still here. Just as Yukari was filled with emotion, Sho sensed something unusual again. The novel mentioned that the male protagonist had a boy, but Kippei's child back then was clearly a daughter. What could be the reason for this? Sho continued to study the manuscript and suddenly seemed to understand something, walking towards Yukari. He gently brushed aside Yukari's hair and saw a prominent black mole behind her ear. Sho suddenly realized that this book was not Kippei's memoir, but rather his beautiful longing for future life. Because Yukari had a mole behind her ear, the female protagonist in the novel was given this characteristic. Since Yukari had mentioned wanting a boy, the novel included a son for them. The snippets recorded in the novel were also the happy times the two had spent together. At this moment, Yukari finally understood Kippei's true feelings, kneeling on the ground and crying out loud. She rushed to the hospital as fast as she could, arriving by the bedside, recounting her experiences of the past few days to her boyfriend. She admitted that she was not a competent girlfriend, as she had neglected their life together due to work, having been carefully cared for by Kippei, yet she had been willful and reckless. Yukari tightly held Kippei's hand, hoping to spend the rest of her life with him. But Kippei still showed no response, intensifying the fear in Yukari's heart. She desperately pleaded with her boyfriend to wake up soon. The next day, Sho waited downstairs at his ex-wife's house for his daughter to finish school. He took the initiative to rush out, but didn't know how to start a conversation. Instead, his daughter calmly told her classmates that the gentleman in front of her was her biological father. This made Sho smile with relief. He knew his daughter had already forgiven him. Pink cherry blossoms filled the branches, and Yukari finally had the leisure to enjoy such beauty and had time to take care of Kippei. Just as Yukari looked out the window, Kippei's fingers suddenly twitched gently, and then he slowly opened his eyes. Yukari was instantly filled with tears. She knew this was a miracle brought about by love.